Chat, there we go. Michelle, can you hit the identify thing? Excellent. So thanks for taking an interest in this. Certainly appreciate it. This the lady off to the side of the screen here, she's showing up now, is Michelle.
Hi.
She's the support specialist for the fire department. And then the other gentleman you probably see there on your screen is Kevin Searwalk, and he's the deputy fire chief. So what we're doing is we are reaching out to the public. There'll be some other opportunities to do this. We're looking for some feedback on operations and service delivery for from the community. It's all part of our strategic planning process, and it's really critical for us to know what the community wants, so we're not operating in a silo. You know, we can have all these great ideas, but if that's not what the townsfolk want, then we're kind of on an uphill battle. So part of this, as we reorganize and redirect and restructure, is getting all that feedback, both internally and externally. So Belle, if you can go ahead and bring up the first slide. I'm going to run you through a slide, Linda. If you have questions along the way, feel free to ask. There we go. So basically what we're doing is we're doing the initial step in strategic planning for us. And our intention is to make this a 2-year plan with us coming back after 2 years, once we have identified and started doing some work to update the plan. And then from there, it'll become a 3 to 5 year plan, depending on what the potential projects look like, what our accomplishments in the first 2 years are, and those types of things. We're strategic planning. I don't know how familiar you are with strategic planning, but what we're looking at initially is where we are right now. Basically, we're slowing everything down. We're getting everybody into review mode, and we're looking at what services we're really providing. Are we providing them effectively? Are they efficient, or as efficient as they can be when we provide them? And we're just getting a general overview of what's actually happening within the organization. And if you've ever worked someplace or a bigger organization or bigger company, you probably know that you can lose track pretty easily if there's so many moving pieces. So this is the first thing we're looking at, is what are we actually doing? The second piece of strategic planning as we go through this is to look at what's not working and what the needs are. And that's really critical to make sure that we're not wasting effort. Like I said, we want to be efficient, so we don't want to be wasting money. And we don't want to be delivering products that aren't what our consumers want. And our consumers are the people we respond to for emergencies or ambulance calls, those types of things. And then the third part of this process is actually developing a plan. And like I said, it'll be a 2-year plan where we'll set goals and objectives to meet those goals. And we'll move towards the recommendations that we identified out of this process. We do an internal and an external look. Like I said, the internal look, we bring all the firefighters together. We talk about mission, we talk about vision and values. We conduct a SWOT analysis where we look at what we're doing good, what we're not doing so good, what the threats and the opportunities are outside the organization. We collect all of that data, in addition to the data that we're hoping to collect through this process, and develop that plan that way. So that's what the whole strategic planning process is all about for us. Go ahead, Beth. So like we said, why community-oriented strategic planning? We could certainly live in our silo and push some stuff out there, but it's not going to do us any good when we try to talk about how much good we're doing for the community if we're not delivering a product they want. So the 4 bullets that you see there are really why we do community-oriented strategic planning. And it's not just one section of the community. We really want to get feedback from all of the stakeholders that are in the community, whether it's business people, whether it's representatives from the university, people that live on the Glenburn side of the community, out near Pusha, or people that live down here in the basin or anywhere in the community. Business owners are critical, or anybody who's a stakeholder here. We really want their feedback because we do provide service to everybody that's in this community, or even those that just pass through on a transient basis, we provide service to. So it's really important for us to get that data. You can go ahead, Bill. So we have some core missions within the fire department, and we'll talk a little bit about these. Talk a little bit about these when we get into divisions, but our core mission is fire suppression. That's the fire trucks going out, putting out fires. Emergency medical services, that's the ambulance service that we run. Special operations involves special rescue functions, such as rope rescue. Sometimes we get called to assist people who are stuck in what are known as confined spaces. And that might be a catch basin on the side of the road. That might be a culvert at the end of a driveway. That might be some type of machinery that requires people to go inside at any number of places, whether it's at the university or whatever the case may be. We do rope rescue. So if we have to go up on height and rescue somebody by rope, that's what we'll do. We can also use that over embankments, or where we're doing water rescue evolutions on the lake or on the river. And the river presents special hazards because at times of the year it is swift water. So there's special training for that we have to do as well as ice rescue and surface rescue. Emergency management is basically planning for emergencies within the community. That might be any type of natural disaster, whether it's a winter storm or a summer storm, such as a bad thunderstorm, or should we get a microburst or a tornado, something along those lines. We also look at areas in the community that need some type of risk reduction or mitigation to help deal with constant flooding or erosion that creates problems, or those types of things. Emergency management is really about protecting both people and property and getting ready for disaster. It's also about recovery as well. Underneath emergency management, also you'll find public health. So when we did our COVID response, when we're getting ramped up looking at things like monkeypox or some of those other things, that's all an emergency management function. And then community risk reduction is a retooling of what used to be known as fire prevention, or it's bringing fire prevention underneath its umbrella. And community risk reduction really is a holistic approach or look at all the risks that there are in the community that we might be exposed to, or that we might be able to intervene in to limit the impact. So when we think about community risk reduction, we're certainly looking at fire safety, but we're also looking at things like medication safety or fall safety for at-risk groups for falling down, or hoarding situations, or anything along those lines that present a risk to the community or to the individual within the community. Any questions about those 5? Excellent. Go ahead, Val, you can move on. So out of those 5, we actually break down into divisions. And a division is just a way for us to spread out the work and make sure that people are, we have people accountable for certain areas and those types of things. If you think about a big business, such as one of the tech companies or whatever, they have engineers, they have developers, they have salespeople, they have marketing, they have security, they have waste services, all of those types of things. Well, even though the fire department is small compared to those major conglomerates, we certainly have a significant number of responsibilities that we have to manage. So we break it down into these smaller sections. And we talked about fire suppression already. Emergency medical services we talked about, but underneath that heading of a division, that even breaks out into things like quality assurance to make sure we're doing training appropriately, acquiring medical supplies, maintenance of the ambulances, all of those things. Community risk reduction, again, we already talked about. Also under community risk reduction though, we look at things like public education. So not only falls, but we're talking about fire prevention in schools. We're talking about delivery of fire safety lectures to seniors, and other at-risk groups, and those types of topics. Special operations, we already talked about. Another major division for us is the training division. So everything that we do, every discipline that I talked about, we have specialized training that goes with it. That is anywhere from 40 to 80 hours for the first class. And then there's usually another 8 or 16 hours for continuing education that we have to deliver each year. And then in addition to that, our emergency medical services licenses have to be renewed every 3 years. And depending on the level you're at, you could be up to close to 80 hours within 3 years that you need to have in certain topics that involve ambulance work, emergency medicine, those types of things. So we have one person that's in charge of that division, and then we have 2 or 3 people that are broken out below them to manage that fire training or the hazardous materials training or those other things. And actually under special operations, I forget to mention, is hazardous materials. And Orono has a technician level team, which is the highest level of hazardous materials response that we can provide. And basically a hazardous materials team is, the goal of that team is to provide intervention in the event of an accidental or man-made release of some type of product, maybe a chemical or maybe a naturally occurring chemical like milk that spills into a waterway that could potentially harm people, the environment, or property. And those are the 3 priorities that we look at protecting. We are that high-level technical team. We are the only team within 65 miles of Orono. There's one to the west of us and one to the north of us. So we have a very large catchment area. We look at Hancock and Washington County and southern end of Aroostook County that we may be responsible to. Because of our team designation, we can be activated as a state asset, which means we're also potentially deployable for national incidents as well. So we may go anywhere in the state of Maine if the state calls on us. We may go anywhere in Atlantic Canada because of the Canada-US compact. So anywhere from Saint Stephen, from Saint Stephen all the way up the coast so they run into their next team. We may be the backup team for that group. And as I said, nationally, we could deploy on a national deployment because of our status and our technical capability. And then emergency management, like I talked about, involves a lot of that planning. It also involves training for municipal employees, school employees, and stuff like that on how to handle events, how to manage them correctly, how to get reimbursement, how to speak with the media and those types of things. Go ahead, Bill. So just some general information about the fire department and how it's laid out. Recently, within the last couple of years, we went from 3 shifts to 4 shifts of firefighters that are in the station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The fire station on Main Street next to the town office is the only fire station we have in town. And we cover the entire, I think it's 30 some odd square miles in Orono out of that fire station. And we run all of our operations out of that fire station. The firefighters work an average of 42 hours a week. That's broken out into 24-hour days. They're there for the whole 24-hour period. And they are scheduled for 3 days off in between their next period. Very rarely do they see a full 3 days, though. Very often they are in working extra. They're in doing training, or in the event of a larger incident or when both ambulances are called out, we do what's called a callback, and firefighters will come in and work extra to make sure that the town is covered. So they will do those callback periods when it's necessary. All but 2 firefighters in the department right now are are licensed paramedics, or will be licensed paramedics. As soon as you get hired for the town of Orono as a firefighter, you have to become a paramedic, and that's the highest level possible for ambulance providers in the state of Maine. And our charge from both the community and the council in the past is to provide that higher level of care. And that's the way we do it, is by making sure all of our people are cross-trained be able to deliver that service. All firefighters are certified at the hazardous materials technician level. Everybody who we hire who's new, one part of their probation is they spend a week going through that training. So they learn how to wear those chemical proof suits. They learn how to turn valves and upright containers and those types of things while they're wearing those big encapsulated suits. And then we send them down to Anniston, Alabama for a week where they learn about chemical, biological, and nerve agents, how to manage those types of agents. And they actually spend some time in the live agent lab where they're exposed to a live agent just to give them that type of experience. All of our firefighters are represented by the International Association of Firefighters. It's important to note that because they are the bargaining group for the firefighters. So when we look at things like changes in schedule, wage increases, any of those things, that has to go through the union. That's not something that we can just arbitrarily say that we're going to do. That's negotiated. And our unions right now are working on we're currently on a 2-year cycle for the contract, which means we just settled the contract, and in 2 years we'll negotiate again. Once that's done, more than likely we'll go back to a 3-year cycle for a contract. And over that duration, we'll talk about what raises will come annually, benefits, and those types of things. So, Bell, I'm all set. Was there a question or did somebody chime in?
You had a new person join.
Okay, all right, great. So it's important to understand our service areas. Our primary area is Orono and VZ. And I put VZ under our primary area because we provide them with contractual based ambulance services. We also do a lot of mutual aid with the town of VZ. If there's anything of any size, whether it's a simple car fire or a house fire or anything like that, our fire department usually goes and supports them and gives them that backup. So they really have become our primary service area. Secondary are the towns that we will go to frequently for what's known as mutual aid. And in that process, we give them aid. And when we have something big, we run out of resources, they reciprocate it right away. So those secondary towns you see there are Old Town, Milford, Bangor, and Glenburn. And then we have tertiary areas, which I've already talked about with the hazardous materials team. So for Penobscot County, we will go anywhere in Penobscot County for both fire calls and emergency medical services calls and hazmat calls because we are part of a county mutual aid group. So we provide those resources. And likewise, we get those resources back. So if something happened and we needed Millinocket down here because they are part of that mutual aid group, it's expected that they would honor that document they've signed and they would come down and support us. And the other three, like I talked about, are potential callouts statewide, more likely than the other two, but certainly something to think about because it's always a possibility. Okay, Bill. So this is just a general graph of our trends for service demand beginning fiscal year 15 to fiscal year 22. And this is what I publish when I do the annual report or what have you. The fiscal year for the town starts July 1 of the preceding year and ends June 30th of the following year. So fiscal year 15 would actually start July 1 of 2014 and end June 30th, 2015. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, great. So this is just the data that we have collected and pushed out. And basically it's intended to give you a trend of where we are as an organization. And we kind of had an uptick there from 15 to about 17, 18. And then we swooped in, and of course, 20 was kind of a hit to us with COVID and everything else. 19 was certainly an off year. We're not sure exactly what happened there, but we are on another upswing, and I'll show you. We can go to the next slide, and we can show that. So what I did is I went back through to look at 2022. I used calendar year for 2022 to show you where we are this year. And we are up significantly from where we were last year. And actually 2019, which was the last year pre-COVID is what I'll call it. So this year we are at 92 calls ahead, which is I think about 30-something% if I remember. There's a slide on it coming up that we'll take a look at. Averaging 6 calls a day. Now I'll tell you that our calls run very oddly. There'll be some days where we'll do 3 calls and other days where we'll do 12. So the easiest way to do that is to break it out as an average to give you some idea of where we are. By far, emergency medical services are our heaviest used service. It drives a lot of our demand. And very often we will have both ambulances out of the station and be a little short staffed in the firehouse for other calls because we're answering those emergency medical service calls. So anyway, to date right now, we're at 192 calls for 2022. As you can see there, 192 calls. I should have spelled this out clear. 192 calls in January was our peak day month of calls. So back up, that's not our calls for the year. 192 calls was our peak calls for that year, and that occurred in January. We are averaging 6 calls per day, and we have 72% of our calls are EMS. We go to October of 2021. October, we had 188 calls that month. That was our peak call load that month. And then 19 was 170 calls. I think when I developed this slide, I missed a nugget of data that I wanted to push out to you guys. So I apologize for that. But just to give you the gist of where we are right now, we are projecting we're going to be at over 1,900 calls this year, almost 2,000 calls because of our volume. And then in 2022, we were low. We were 1,830 or something along those lines. But that's where we are right now. Go ahead, Bell. Just to give you an idea of what our fleet looks like, these are all capital purchases. Right now in the firehouse, we have 2 fire engines. Those are the trucks that carry the hose and the water. One of them is active and on the road all the time. The other one is in reserve because if the primary breaks down, we need to make sure we have a second truck so that we're not relying on our neighbors when they're already short on equipment. But the other thing is that if the first truck is out and we have another incident or we have a major incident where we need multiple trucks, that second truck is a benefit to have. So while it is considered a reserve, it has the capacity to fill multiple roles should it need to be called on. We have 2 paramedic level ambulances. We have a tower truck, which is shown on the screen there. And that vehicle actually replaces what would be considered a ladder truck. And I like to call it a truck that has a dumpster on a stick. That big dumpster looking thing you see at the end of the ladder there is a platform that the firefighters can stand on. This is absolutely probably one of the most versatile tools that we have because not only can it serve as a ladder truck, in a crisis, it can pump water if it needs to. It's also a platform for us to perform some of those special operations like we talked about. So if we have to haul somebody out of a cistern or a tank or something like that, that would be the high point where we could deploy ropes from and lower people into that space so they could access those victims or those casualties or what have you. The other thing too is reaching heights. So heights are very important, especially if we got to do some type of ventilation to open a roof on a house. If we have somebody stuck at height or we need to take somebody out of a window, whether it's a fire or medical call. And then it's an elevated platform for water. So if goodness sake, or if goodness forbid that we have a fire in 1 or 2 of these downtown buildings, we would need that elevated stream to adequately suppress that and keep that fire from spreading. The other thing about this truck is it's a safer platform in bad weather. So when I tell you the truck is 110 feet, what people really think of is, wow, that's really high. And it is really high. But if you think about how far back some of the houses set from the roads here in Orono, that 110 feet is not only height, but it's also reach off the side of the truck. So in the wintertime or in other times where it's not safe for us to set up ground ladders that we would normally use to reach our chimney or to open up a roof, we can use that truck, that reach of that truck to get to those areas to be able to do those things. And also in some of those other scenarios, reach is important for the rope deployment or those types of things. Hazardous materials response vehicle and trailer. All those vehicles do are carry equipment related to hazardous materials response. So it's the suits, it's millions of dollars worth of equipment and testing equipment, in meters, in computers, radios, the whole 9 yards. Decontamination equipment. We have one rescue boat that we will take out onto the river and the lake if we need to. We'll also support Old Town, Milford, and Bangor. If they deploy their boat, we're able to give them some assistance as well. We have 2 support vehicles. Those are the 2 pickup trucks. One is operated by the deputy fire chief, and that's his normal vehicle that he uses for administrative function, but he's also able to tow the boat or the trailer if he needs to. He is able to carry hose, wildland equipment, any of those things. And the other pickup truck is specifically for just utility work. So all the things that I just talked about in the deputy chief's vehicle, plus if we need to move equipment around to do our testing or those types of things, that's usually what that truck is used for. And then we have one administrative command vehicle that I use for my administrative functions, for meetings, for details, those types of things. And it also serves as a command post should we have an incident. That will go to the scene. I'll throw open the back. I have clipboards and I have tracking equipment and all that stuff to keep track of where people are at the fire, identify things that we've done, things that we need to do. It's a planning point and those types of things. So that's what our fleet is. Now, I will tell you that those apparatus are extremely expensive, and they're just getting more so. Pumper trucks right now, the engines are well over $600,000, and the ladder truck or the tower truck there is going to be over $1 million when it comes time to replace it. It's the cost, especially with inflation, have gone through the roof. So capital purchases, they're meant to last 20 years. Orono is incredibly lucky because they do get 20 plus years out of those big trucks here, which is unheard of in other places. I came from Auburn, and if I could get 12 years out of one of those bigger trucks, I was happy before I moved it to the back line. And as it turns out, your trucks here are well maintained. The roads, Rob Yerxa does an incredible job on the roads. All of those things certainly increase the lifespan of your apparatus that we do. Okay, Bill, thanks. So just a real quick budget review to give you some idea of where we are financially and how much you're spending on the fire department here in Orono. FY23, which is the year that we're in right now, we're looking at a little over $2.6 million to run the fire department. And out of that is all the salary, all the benefits, that's including overtime, all of our operational expenses, all the equipment we have to purchase, all the maintenance, all the contracts for testing, things like or for contracts for testing and maintenance. So our hose, our pumps, our ladders, our heart monitors, our ambulance stretchers, all of those things require annual certification to make sure that they are safe to use, and we're not putting people on faulty equipment or those types of things. So that is an increase of $300,000 from last year's budget, and I believe that our total budget is about a 13% increase from what it was last year. The biggest budget drivers that we have in this increase, and that we're probably going to see again going forward in the incoming year, are going to be salaries and overtime. Now, we are doing some things to curb overtime. We just received a Fire Act grant, which is going to allow us to overstaff with some firefighters. So instead of paying overtime, what we will do is we will drop the number of firefighters that are assigned to a shift. to help curb some of those overtime expenses. So salaries and overtime are always a budget driver. They make up about 90% of the budget in every fire department. They will be the biggest budget driver from now, probably forever, would be my estimation, as long as you run a full-time fire department. Fleet maintenance was our biggest budget driver in the previous fiscal year. We planned for it to be a big budget driver in this year, but we've actually been able to take some initiative, and one of our firefighters in-house is a diesel mechanic, a certified diesel mechanic, who's also a trained emergency vehicle technician. So he went to school, he received certification to be able to work on the fire trucks and the ambulances and the smaller vehicles. And we're using him because it turns out the wage that we pay him in overtime is almost 50% less than the wage that we were paying a private contractor to service our vehicles. So it made sense to us, if he's willing to do the work within his capacity for as much as he can do, is to hire him to come back and do those functions. And he is an excellent mechanic. He keeps us informed of current issues and potential issues. He brings us alternatives and options, and we're very happy with what we're getting out of for a product from him. And he has a lot of pride in the vehicles because he works, he has to run out of them, and he takes very good care of them. And for a cheap alternative to labor, he does an outstanding job. He's definitely, if he were in the private sector, he could be making, well over $120 an hour because of his efficiency and his expertise. So fleet maintenance will continue to be a driver, but I'm hoping it'll be significantly less than what it was. And like I talked about contract services, we don't control the cost on contract services, but as far as liability goes and protection for our staff and the patients that we treat and just the public in general, we've got to maintain those, and we really need those third-party evaluations and certifications, if you will, to make sure that our equipment is up and running. And the contract services actually provide us some cost reduction when we have to do annual maintenance or emergency maintenance on some of our equipment. So again, those are budget drivers, but they are critical budget drivers to have. So go ahead, Bill. You missed one. There we go. So just a brief synopsis of some of the higher level projects that we're working on. I will tell you that I arrived here in 2018, and we really, the firefighters, after I arrived here, we had a conversation. We talked about things that we wanted to get going and projects we wanted to take on. And we have been producing a lot of work over at the fire department. Now, a lot of people don't hear about it because we don't tout it a lot, number one. And number two, it's really been internally focused on getting our things aligned, getting our programs aligned, figuring out where we want it to be. But I think these are some of the things that we have done that I think are worth talking about. And I will tell you that all of these things have been driven or managed by the firefighters. Now, I have a hand in it, and the deputy chief has a hand in it, but a lot of this stuff has been managed, facilitated, retooled, and trialed by the firefighters themselves, the fire officers. So I can't speak highly enough about their efforts in making some of this go. Some of the accomplishments, like you see here, we got together with the town of Glenburn in BZ, and we've developed a community training center. When I talk about a 3 community training center, what I'm talking about is a facility where we can go out and train firefighters to do certain tasks, such as raising ground ladders and doing rope rescue and simulate confined spaces for them to go and learn in. We're going to be putting another. So what we did is we built it out of Connex boxes, which are basically trailer truck trailers that are more structurally rigid. And we're looking at bringing another Connex box out so that we can actually do live burns in it to simulate firefighting, those things. Having 3 communities come together, share cost, identify a site, all get together what the program should look like and what the facility should look like was in my mind, a huge accomplishment for all three communities that were able to make that happen. It's hard to get three towns together to agree on something, and we were able to do this. I think it's great. We developed an internal instructor category for EMS related programs. A lot like fleet maintenance, EMS programs, the instructors are very expensive because it's a necessary thing that you have to have. In Maine Emergency Medical Services, which is the regulatory board for Maine EMS, requires that most programs are taught by certified instructors. So what we did is we looked at the cost of contracting with outside instructors versus having our own people do it in-house. We identified people in-house that wanted to do training. We looked at the overtime wage versus what it costs to bring an instructor in 3 or 4 times to make sure we hit all the shifts. And it ended up being a no-brainer for us. It's cheaper for us to pay one person at an overtime rate than it is to hire out to these instructors to bring them in. We provide them all the training, we provide them all the teaching adjuncts that they need. We make sure that we are current with the approved standard, and that's what they teach to. So not only are we saving money, we're making sure internally that our providers are getting the most recent and the best education that they can. Retooling the life safety and fire prevention program. I talked a little bit about that earlier. This is still really in its infancy. And we're looking at bringing 3 internal departments together, both the fire prevention division or the life safety inspector in the fire department, a representative from the police department, and the code enforcement officer to retool. We're working with, I'm working closely with Mitch in the economic development department, Mitch Stone. Great person to work with, very open to ideas. I really like where this project is going, because I think it's going to streamline and be a better process to not only help businesses when they come in, but also to deal with some of those other issues. And our focus really is to support people as they go through a process and find them reasonable, appropriate accommodations when we can, versus being punitive. And that's really the whole retooling process that we're going through, in addition to some public education things, those types of things. Redesigning and training and evaluation system for new firefighters and officers, which is really a cultural thing that has been embraced. And if you know anything about culture, it's really hard to change, but our organization has recognized that this is something that we need to do. So we are grinding our way through that. And probably one of the other big things that I have at the bottom here is the amount of money that we've been able to acquire in grants. Recently, we have been able to outfit an entire fitness center for us, which is well over $40,000. We received over $600,000 for the SAFER grant for those extra firefighters, all from the federal government. We recently received a grant to be able to purchase self-rescue devices, so that when firefighters find themselves in a precarious situation in the building and need to basically jump out a window, they have these lowering devices. They can go onto a rope that they carry and lower themselves to the ground instead of hanging out a window, dropping, those types of things. Just a phenomenal amount of money. And Deputy Chief Sarwal has been driving that, but there's been others that have been really involved. A firefighter by the name of Sam Weissman, Captain Aaron Jellison, just a whole group of people that have been instrumental in this process. So again, I can't say enough about these people. Thank you, Bill. Go ahead. And then some of the ongoing projects that we're working at. Continuing ed, DEI initiatives have been clearly identified as a priority of the council. It's definitely something that a significant amount of the the community is interested in. And it would be foolish for us to not look at this stuff on our own and start taking initiatives on our own to look at awareness and understand where we fit in that role and things that we can do better. So part of the package for people to look at when we post tomorrow, and I'll mention this again, but we're going to post a link to the survey and some definitions of what the functions are. We'll also include our human dignity statement, our mission statement, and just so people have an idea of what we think and what we do. And through this, they understand that we recognize it. We're in step with the town, and we have an interest in this. We think it's valuable, and we want to make sure that if this is a concern to the community and our counselors, then it's a concern to us. It has to be addressed. We're examining again how community risk reductions performed. I kind of talked about this a little bit. We definitely want to look for opportunities and optimize efforts where we can. And part of this process is looking at areas that we're not meeting and developing a better program. We are still continuing to look at providing opportunities for professional development. Leadership and management are go hand in hand, but they are certainly two different animals when you really boil it down. So we're looking at a dual track of leadership, where leadership focuses on the person, and management, where management focuses on the process and rules and regulations and those types of things. And we really have identified that they need to be blended. So we're retooling that process and encouraging opportunities, or looking for opportunities, encouraging people to take college classes, to attend the National Fire Academy in Pittsburgh, Maryland. And at some point here, we'll stand up our own program, but time is what it is, and it's difficult to get those things spun up and going in your own organization. So we're looking to push people out wherever we can. All the guiding documents for the organization are up for review, so we're retooling and looking at all those. And also, like I said previously, our community education efforts. What are we delivering to school kids? How are we measuring that? Are we adjusting those presentations based on age? And what are the outcomes after a certain period of time? Those are all things that we're looking to put into place. So, all right, Bill. And that's it. That's the whole slide presentation. So what we're going to do is tomorrow on our website, and we'll publish this everywhere, the Orono Fire Department website, we're going to provide a link for the survey. We would love to have people take the survey. It's a simple 5 questions that, can I see one of those surveys, please? So what we're looking for in the survey is for you to give us up to 5 of expectations you have for the fire department, up to 5 concerns that you have about the fire department. Looking for any positive feedback or strengths that you see or may know of. We're looking for any other relevant feedback or comments, good or bad, it doesn't matter. We want to know. We have a question about the services we provide and what you think of them. And then our final couple questions relate to a statement, which is our authorized position. It talks about budget and call increase and those types of things. There's just a couple questions that follow that. It's a very short 7-question survey. I expect that the next survey we do when we get into the larger plan, once we have some awareness of where we are and what the community is going for, will probably be a longer survey. But that's what we're looking at right now to get started with. We don't want to overwhelm people, and frankly, we don't want to be overwhelmed with information either. We want info, there's no doubt about it. We want to make sure we can process it and have it be meaningful. So, yeah. So if you have questions, or if anybody else has questions, I'm certainly more than willing to hear them. Yeah.
I have to say I'm very pleased with everything you do. I was an EMT, a volunteer EMT in Orono for 10 years back before the fire department took it over. I mean, I was here when we were parked in a barn on Bennick Road, right, and built the rescue building. This winter, I fell in my driveway and broke my kneecap, and the guys were fantastic that came and picked me up. They were beyond wonderful. One thing I'm thinking of, because I volunteer with AARP, I'm always working on things that help the elderly, and I don't know how to reach a lot of the elderly in Orono. But for myself, it would be nice to be able to pop in to the fire station whenever I need it and get a blood pressure reading, or I'm a single person. If I find a tick on me, I would love to be able to pop in and just have an EMT pick the tick off and say, oh yeah, that's a bad one, that's a good one, whatever. Little things like that, just basic community, and I don't know liability wise if that's something you can do as a community service rather than a fee driven thing.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
the only other thing I can think of is when I moved here 40 years ago, I live in the Sailor neighborhood. And you guys used to come burn that field between Gilbert and Mainwood every year, as you know, as training exercise and whatnot. And that was a wonderful thing. And that hasn't been burned for a lot of years. But it's filled with ticks, it's filled with deer. It's, you know, somewhat of a liability as it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
that's all I've got.
so I can answer your first question right now, which is about blood pressure. If you want your blood pressure checked, feel free. Yeah, we're absolutely more than happy to come in and check your blood pressure if you get questions or anything like that. The tick thing is, as simple as it sounds, might pose a little different question for us. I'm gonna have to explore that a little bit, but I will tell you that any questions or any comments that we get will be recorded and they will come out in the final product, which I hope to have done within a couple months, because it's a long process to gather all this data. So look for it.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of that sort of as a way to get some people to get in and see a fireman or an emergency person without there being a major emergency, just a building community thing.
Yeah. So we don't mind coming in. We don't mind having people stop by, do stuff like that. If they want to pop in and talk or see the trucks or whatever the case may be, that there's no bill for blood pressure checks or, hey, you know, I got a question. I'm not feeling this. I'm not feeling that. There's no bill for that. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Great.
Otherwise, I'm happy with what you guys do.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Bill, do you see any other questions or comments or anything out there?
You do have other participants, and they are welcome to unmute themselves and ask a question if they want to.
Okay, I was going to say, I only see Linda on the screen, so. Okay. Well, I guess, so for anybody that might be listening, or like I said, Linda, on our webpage, on the Orono Fire Department webpage, tomorrow we will have a link up for the questionnaire. There will be a link. So one of the questions asks about our programs. We've included a summary sheet of what our programs do. So if you missed it here tonight, or you have questions about it, you can go to that page and look at it. If you don't remember what fire prevention does, it'll be spelled out on that page, or you don't remember what hazardous materials does, you can find it on there. Those two documents will be up there. We'll also have, like I say, a link to our human dignity statement and our mission statement, just so you can see what we're doing with those types of things. And yeah, for those of you that are on with us, I certainly appreciate it. And pass the word if you know any other residents in town that want to just pop on and do a short survey. We'd love to get their feedback. The more we get off this sheet, the better it's going to be for us to build a product that's meant to serve the community. So,
and Jeff will also post a link to this video. So if anybody that you know of would really enjoy listening to this presentation, they'll be able to click a link on that same page.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Linda. We'll look for a report here in a couple months. We'll see you later. Thank you, Bill.